When I was a kid, about 5 or 6 years old, I had regular encounters with shadow people, especially at night, to the point where I would hate going to the bathroom alone in the dark, because they would literally line the walls of the hallway from my room to the bathroom, just staring at me, despite having no facial features. With the shadow people, though, I never felt threatened, just unnerved. One night, I had to go to the bathroom, and my parents were asleep, so I was stuck going alone. I didn't see any shadow people that night, but I still kept my head down and walked quickly. As a kid, I also had anxiety about closed doors for some reason, so I left the door open a crack. I was just about to get up and leave when the door slowly opened. I could hear footsteps down the hall, like someone with shoes on was shuffling on the floor. We didn't wear shoes inside, and I felt a really strong feeling of dread. I saw a faint blue turquoise glowing light from the end of the hallway, and then I saw a man. He was walking sideways down the hall towards me. He was gliding effortlessly, like it was the way he always walked. He was smiling and facing into the bathroom. He had brown hair, plastic-like, like a Ken doll, and he was wearing jeans and a turquoise button-up shirt. His arms were out at his sides. Strangely, he didn't seem fully there. His form sort of flickered with bits of color, like when you rub your eyes and see random colorful flashes, but he never disappeared or anything. He was very much real. I panicked and looked away, and was stuck just sitting there, frozen, until I couldn't hear his shuffling anymore. I looked down the hallway and he was gone, and I ran back to my room. I never told anyone for years, and I don't know why. I don't even think I told my best friend, or brought him up when people were sharing ghost stories. Then, one day, my mom and I were out walking the dog, and the topic of how haunted our old house was came up. She told me that she had a lot of weird dreams there, but one in particular stood out to her. In the dream, she was in bed. Her room was in the same hallway as mine, facing out into it, and she was very aware that a bunch of people were in the house, and that she wanted them out. Then, she saw the same man, walking the same way down the hallway. She got the same feeling of dread, and wanted him gone as soon as possible. She didn't tell anyone about him, not my dad, not her sister, no one, and she doesn't know why either. When she told me about this, I almost started crying. I still don't know why, but when I talk about him, I get choked up and start to feel really scared, even though I've never seen him since. I don't know what he is or if he still exists, but neither of us had told anyone about him until that day. I've heard recently that some people report similar feelings of intense emotion when talking about aliens. I posted about him in another sub, and someone suggested an alien. Maybe that's what he is? Has anyone else in this thread seen him or anything at all like him? I'd love some insight into what he is, or just another person who has encountered him. This story happened when I was working the 150-mile line between Nashville and Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was working a local job on that run called the Cowan Pusher, with the mountain grade starting at Cowan and basically going all the way to Chattanooga. It can be a difficult stretch of railroad. I had the third shift on the Cowan Pusher. It was all I could hold, even if I didn't enjoy working nights. We basically just sat in the shop and waited to be called to help heavy tonnage trains get to Sherwood, Tennessee. Now all I can say about Sherwood is picture the hills have eyes with banjos added in. On the night in question, it was about 11:50 p.m. when a heavy freight train stopped over at Sherwood and requested our help to get over to the other side of the mountain. We climbed on the engines and got on our way. By the time we hit South Cowan and started curving up the foot of the mountain, we had no visibility of anything that wasn't illuminated by the locomotive light. We had a 30-minute ride ahead of us, along with a 2-mile-long dark tunnel in our path. As the clock struck midnight, we were now in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods filled with wolves, rattlesnakes, and a few mountain folks. Most of the mountain folk are nice, but don't let the sun set with your ass in those woods. About 10 minutes later, the north portal of the tunnel was in sight. A bridge overhung the entrance. A branch line that was taken up long ago crossed it, going to another part of the mountains. The bridge is still accessible by ATVs. As I looked up, I saw a campfire and people. They all looked to be dressed darkly, maybe even in masks. All I could see was white in the faces. As we started under the bridge, we heard a thud over our heads on the locomotive roof. We proceeded through the dark tunnel and slowed just out of the south portal as the conductor looked out the back door with his flashlight. He saw nothing, so we shrugged our shoulders and proceeded on the last 10 minutes to our waiting train. It was 2:20 a.m. as we coupled onto the rear of the train to push it from Sherwood. As the engineer on the head end entered the south portal of the tunnel, he radioed back to me talking about figures standing over the tunnel entrance. However, no one was there as I passed it. As we exited the north portal, I tried to see on my side of the tracks whatever had hit our roof. I saw what looked like a black cloak fluttering in the wind as we passed, but I couldn't really tell. As we entered Cowan, we uncoupled on the fly and the train continued to Nashville. We cruised on in to our parking track and tied our engines down. As we got off, we had the feeling of being watched, but thought nothing of it as we parked our asses in the office chairs. We had no more work for the rest of our shift. We talked and napped off and on until about 3 a.m., but we never did shake the feelings of being watched, so we stepped outside. I put a pinch of dip in my lip, and my conductor lit a cigarette. As we bullshitted, we both noticed movement in the brush across the tracks. Now I must remind all of you that both my conductor and myself are big country boys who don't scare easy. We went over to investigate, and found 3 hooded men in the bushes. With a huge spit of my tobacco, I said, "What the hell are you guys doing here? You understand you're trespassing on railroad property, right?" The lead guy then spoke up in a demonic, gravelly tone.
"We just want what's ours."
As he said this, he motioned to the top of the locomotive. We looked to see a young man on the roof at the air horn. The young man was only wearing underwear, and as we all looked at him, he bolted off the roof, climbed down, and ran down the tracks. As this happened, the figures turned to chase. The lead guy then turned his head back towards us with glowing eyes that we could now see. He stared for a second, then he gave chase with his friends. We called the police. After hours of investigation, they found the man's underwear. No traces of him or cloaked individuals. We even took them up the mountain. Cops love free train rides, but there was nothing. Now, on occasion, we find dead animals by the shop door or locomotive. I've even found 1 or 2 at my door at home. We still occasionally see that same fire on that bridge and get the feeling of being watched, but it's all gone by the time we return. There is a cult somewhere on that mountain. I don't drive. I haven't in over a decade. And when people ask why, I have a litany of reasons I give them. I'm from New York, but now live in Wyoming, so most of the time I simply lie and say that I never learned, and that in New York I easily got around with buses and cabs. I tell my husband it gives me panic attacks, which it does, but he doesn't understand why because I never told him. For the first time ever, I'm going to explain why I don't drive, and the source of the panic attacks it gives me. A little over 10 years ago, I was living in New York, just 30 minutes north of the city in Rockland County. Rockland has lots of trees and forests, and is the home to the infamous Letchworth Village. I was in my early 20s and was driving home from visiting my sister, and I decided to take a back road shortcut. It had just gotten dark out. The road I was taking was very narrow and wooded on both sides. It also had lots of twists and sharp turns. Being a young idiot and not seeing any other cars on the road, I was doing well past the speed limit and blasting music. The trip from my sister's house to mine via this road was around 10 minutes. The sharpest turn in the road came up, and I barely slowed to take it. That's when it happened. Mid-turn, a figure looking like it was wearing a rain poncho appeared right next to the driver's side of the car. It was tannish in color, and I thought I had just swiped someone crossing the wooded road at night. I slammed the brakes and skidded off the road, barely missing a tree. I knew I had just killed or at least seriously wounded someone. I jumped out of the car and ran back to the area where it happened. Nothing. I had a flashlight on my keyring, a little but powerful LED, and I scanned the road looking for blood or anything. What I saw was far too tall to have been an animal, and it was right next to my window at one point, so I know I saw someone. No doubts. I ran to both sides of the road, seeing if the impact had thrown the person. That's when it hit me. I saw someone, was sure the car made contact, but heard nothing. My music had been blasting, but I'm sure if I did hit something, especially on the driver's side, I would have heard it. Now the area was completely quiet, except for some chirping crickets. I listened hard for moans, or any sign of someone injured. I must have spent 15 minutes looking up and down the road with my flashlight. I went back to my car to look for any signs of damage, because I was beginning to question my sanity. The car was fine, not a scratch, but I knew I hadn't imagined it. This didn't happen out of the corner of my eye. It was within inches from me. I even thought about calling the police, in hopes that if someone was hurt, they'd have a better chance finding them than me. I went back again, and this time I went past the tree line in the driver's side of the road looking for anything. As I was running my light back and forth, trying to figure out what the hell happened, I saw it. A wispy, tannish, almost foggy figure about 20 yards in front of me in the woods. I can't say it was completely transparent, as I couldn't make out shapes behind it, but it also was not solid. I froze like a little bitch. I had no idea what I was looking at. At first, it was still, but before I could begin to figure out what it might be, it zipped behind a tree and disappeared. And it wasn't a big, thick tree either, where someone could dart behind it and take off maintaining their steps because the view is blocked. Also, this was towards the beginning of fall, and the ground was covered in crunchy leaves, but I heard absolutely nothing. Thank God no cars came, because I ran back across the road to my car without looking or caring. I jumped in and took off home. Now, part of me didn't want to believe what I saw, so for days I checked the newspaper, ready to come forward if I found any report of someone getting hit on that road, or even a missing person in the area, but there was nothing. I continued to drive for about 6 or 7 months after this happened, but I started to have harsh panic attacks whenever I had to drive at night, and soon they rolled over to whenever I had to drive. Car keys in my hand even began to set off attacks, so I went to the DMV, handed in my license, and got a state ID. As the years have gone by, the panic at the idea of driving has never subsided, not even a little. Living out in rural Wyoming and not driving is a bitch, and I can't explain to those close to me why I won't simply get over my fear and just drive. Well, I'm not really sure how to end this, so I'll just say, that's my story. No idea what I saw or what exactly happened that night, but the fear of it has never left me, and I seriously doubt it ever will. I've been in a long-distance relationship with my girlfriend for a couple of years, and every summer and winter break I'm able to travel to go see her. This encounter happened about 2 years ago at my girlfriend's house. I should mention that she lives on the outskirts of her city in Mexico, where houses are around 200 to 300 yards apart and surrounded by dense woods. Usually days and nights there go about peacefully, accompanied by the sound of the woods and the occasional car passing by. I had always considered her place to be perfect to spend time outdoors, until this occasion. Honestly, I don't think I've ever been this scared in my life. This sighting will be carved in my mind forever. On a chilly night in December, I was at her house. I had planned to spend the night with her since she would have been by herself that day. Her mom was out of town and she didn't want to be alone. We were having dinner in the kitchen at around 8 p.m. We chatted about activities we could do the next day, tasks her mom asked her to do, how much we missed each other, and other stuff. After about an hour of conversation and laughs, We decided to go into the living room and cuddle up on the couch and watch some TV. We both got up and put the dishes in the sink. She went into her bedroom and I went outside to the bathroom. The house layout consisted of a long corridor that connected pretty much every room in the house, and a back door at the end of the corridor which led to the patio. The patio was open, full of trees and plants, and the only thing separating the patio from the woods was a fence made up of stones and barbed wire that stood at about 1 meter tall. Halfway down the patio, there was a bathroom, being lit by a single and weak light bulb. So if anyone wanted to go, they had to walk outside, even if it had to be in the middle of the night. I remember when I opened the back door and stepped onto the patio, a cold breeze stroked my face and sent shivers across my back. So I hurried to get back in as quickly as possible, because to be honest, I was a little spooked going outside in the darkness, knowing that the woods were pretty much a few steps away. I finished doing my business, washed my hands, and started walking back, being careful not to trip on something, because the light bulb was almost non-existent. I was about halfway when I heard a noise to my left, like someone stepped on a branch. I stopped and quickly turned, trying to see what made the noise, but I could only see a portion of the fence and nothing but darkness beyond that. However, I had this weird feeling that someone or something was watching me, something on the other side of the fence. I stood there in silence for around 30 seconds, listening to the surroundings, only to notice the crickets had stopped chirping. I got a bit freaked out because I knew for sure that they were chirping when I first went out. I was somewhat scared to move, but I did anyways, almost running to get inside as soon as possible. When I returned, I went to my girlfriend, who was already in the living room, laying down on the couch with a blanket on top. She noticed that I was a bit agitated and asked me what was wrong. "Your patio is scary," I jokingly said, not wanting to tell her what I felt because she hates anything that has to do with horror or scary stuff. I decided to brush it off, so I went around the couch and sat at the other end of it, putting my girlfriend's legs on my lap and asking what she was watching on TV. I turned to my right and noticed there was a huge window on one side of the wall that gave me a perfect view of the patio. I didn't really notice it before because it was next to a cabinet. It was kind of covered up as you walked into the living room. Now that I knew about it, though, I kept turning to see outside, still thinking about how scary it looked out there. As we were watching a boring documentary, I took off my girlfriend's socks and started to rub her feet below the blanket. After all, it was a chilly night and her feet were cold. We didn't have any conversation. I was getting sleepy, but after around 20 minutes, I started hearing noises outside. Noises that seemed to be coming from the patio. I grabbed the controller and muted the TV to make sure I was hearing right, and I was. It sounded like tiny twigs breaking and grass being brushed. I quickly turned to my right to see outside the window, but I could only see some plants and part of the trunk from a big tree. The noise, although faint, stopped for a few seconds, resumed a few moments later, and stopped again. I was frozen, watching outside this window, almost as if waiting for a thing to appear. "What is that noise?" I whispered to my girlfriend. But after I didn't get a reply, I turned around and stood up a little, to see she had her eyes closed and had fallen asleep. I was a bit freaked out, but I chose to believe it was probably a coyote or some other animal that lurks around in the woods at night. I kept watching the TV muted, waiting for the noise to start again, but after a while I realized it had stopped. I turned around one more time to see outside the window, and I felt my heart sink to my stomach. The first thing I noticed when I looked outside that time was a faint image of a pale and tall humanoid figure peeking from the side of the big tree trunk, staring right back at me. I suddenly froze in fear, not wanting to even slightly move or breathe. I watched this thing as it watched me, even though I couldn't see its eyes because of the poor lighting. But I knew it was watching me. I knew it was aware of me. I somehow felt it. The creature was, like I said, pale, really pale. I could see the contrast between its skin and the bark of the tree. The creature was very thin, had a really skinny torso and skinny shoulders, as well as an elongated neck. It looked like it was around 6 or 7 feet tall. Unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, I could not distinguish in detail any facial features because of how dark it was, but I could perfectly picture in my head the shadowy areas around where eyes would be for a person, and a huge other one where the mouth would be, and in my mind it was sort of grinning. At this point I was trembling a little, and I wanted to let my girlfriend know what I was witnessing, but I didn't want to move a muscle or break eye contact with it. I felt like I needed to remain still or play dead to lose its attention. But no, the creature kept staring at me, not moving an inch, like it was trying to do the same. Then, to make things worse, the creature started to make echoey clicking sounds, kind of like a frog but slower. I noticed it began to turn its head to its left side and turn back to look at me really fast. I didn't know what to think anymore. All I wanted was my girlfriend to wake up and prove to me that this thing was real. I began whispering her name in between my teeth, not even wanting to move my jaw, but she just wouldn't wake up, and the thing kept doing the same, turning its head to the left and back to me really fast. The creature crouched, kind of like when big predator cats are hunting, and lay low, preparing to attack. "What the hell?" I whispered. I know, stupid. I didn't even think through the fact that if I woke my girlfriend up, she would start moving, and that thing would notice both of us. But I was so scared that I kept trying. This went on for maybe less than 15 minutes before I realized I still had my girlfriend's foot in my hand below the blanket, so the thing would not be able to see me moving. Using only my wrist, I slightly pulled her foot back and forth, whispering her name again and again, but no response. Then I froze in shock when I saw the creature stand up again and start walking backwards, still looking at me, and disappearing into the darkness of the patio, doing the clicking sounds again. I swallowed and blinked a few times, realizing my eyes itched from staring for so long. For some reason I couldn't turn my head around. I kept looking in the direction where the creature disappeared, listening for sounds, and waiting for it to appear once again. A few minutes passed and I took the chance to turn around. Slowly, I turned my head to my girlfriend and started calling her name louder, while pushing her leg and quickly scribbling my fingers on the sole of her foot to wake her up fast. Her foot jerked and she started turning. I patted her and whispered, "Hey, wake up, baby." She opened her eyes and squinted at me, adjusting to the light of the TV, wondering why I'd woke her up. I kept telling her to remain still and silent when I heard the sound again. She looked at me, noticed the concern in my eyes, and asked,
"What's wrong?"
"Shh, be quiet," I followed, putting 2 fingers on her lips and looking into her eyes. I could see she was getting freaked out, and I don't blame her. I would be too if someone woke me up, looking scared and telling me to be quiet. The clicking sound went off again, but it was louder this time, almost as if that thing was on the other side of the window. This time, both of us heard the noise, and we looked at each other in silence, getting more and more scared.
"What is that?"
My girlfriend asked, but I remained quiet. Almost like in slow motion, I started to turn my head to the window to check, and there it was. The thing was right outside another window, only a couple of feet away, and staring right at me. This time, I had a clearer vision of how it looked. I was wrong. I was petrified in fear when I noticed it didn't have a mouth where a person would have it. Instead, the mouth was on its neck, which opened horizontally, not vertically. As its mouth opened, it vibrated with the clicking sounds, and hundreds of really small razor-like teeth shined with the window glare. It had oval-shaped eyes that were as dark as the night. I felt its gaze pierce through my soul. I started shaking and breathing faster, not believing what I was seeing. My girlfriend peeked by my side to see what I was looking at, and I instantly felt her body tense up under me. She started to ask me in a trembling voice what that thing was, but I had no answer for her. Now we were both scared to even move a muscle. After the humanoid noticed my girlfriend move, it gave a step forward and lowered its head, almost as if it was scanning us. We jumped when it made this move, because we thought it was about to try to get into the house. My heart was pounding so fast I thought I was about to faint. Then, the thing began to walk slowly to its right side, in the direction where the door to the corridor was, resuming the clicking sounds. If you've seen the movie Signs and remember the scene where the humanoid came out from the bushes outside of the house, that would be an accurate representation of what we saw. We got a good look at every inch of that thing's body. It walked with its head turned to us. After we lost sight of it through the window, we both sat up and looked at each other, when suddenly we heard something scratch the metal door that led to the corridor, as if the thing was grazing its fingers on it. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my girlfriend's wrist and pulled her out of the living room. We locked ourselves in her room and sat on the floor, hiding in case that thing got in. The scratching sounds continued, and my girlfriend started to cry, still asking what the hell it was. I felt powerless, knowing I couldn't do much to reassure her. I could only hold her and hope for the thing to give up and leave. The noise continued for about 3 more minutes, when it suddenly stopped. Then we began hearing footsteps inside the house, but eventually those noises stopped too, and after an hour or so, we figured the creature had left. My girlfriend, still with tears in her eyes, asked me if we could just lay in bed. I agreed. We slowly crawled into bed, making the least noise possible, and covering ourselves with another blanket. "Don't worry, babe. Everything's going to be okay tomorrow. You just try to get some sleep," I told her as I tightened my grip around her. She didn't reply, but after a while, she fell asleep again. I didn't get a minute of sleep that night. I kept my eyes opened, listening for any sound. The next day, we didn't even want to touch the subject. All we said was that whatever that was not from this world. My girlfriend said she felt the creature's gaze pierce into her, almost as if that thing was feeling with just its sight. Nothing else was said. We were left sort of traumatized. I realized she was going to have to put up with that fear of going outside in the future, and I didn't want that thing anywhere near her again or her family. Days after the encounter, we both suffered from nightmares. She mentioned that she sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, screaming and trembling, and couldn't stop until her mom came in to check on her. The fences that separated the patio and the woods has been redone since. They now stand at 2 meters tall, blocking any easy access from the woods. Before this, they had to make sure they didn't have to go outside at night. They haven't had any other encounters, but my girlfriend insists that the patio still gives her chills. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Send your story or creepypasta to the email in the description. My shirts, Patreon, Instagram, and Twitter are down there too. So if you want to hit me up on Instagram or Twitter, that'd be cool. And if you want to donate and support the channel, that would be cool too. So today I want to talk about 4th of July and dogs. I know it's over 2 weeks away, but we're pretty close. I was talking to my grandma about 4th of July. She's a little bit too crazy. She thinks that they shouldn't have fireworks because dogs get scared. And I say they need to toughen up. I mean, it's understandable to be scared of explosions when you don't know what the hell's going on in reality. But I do know that a ton of dogs get out of their backyards and people lose a lot of dogs around this time. And so I just wanted to say, put your dog in the bathroom. You know, if you're going to be out or whatever, put him in the damn bathroom. Let him be scared in there. Because I think sometimes they do things that, you know, you might think, well, my dog can't get out of the backyard. Well, they might surprise you if they're that terrified. But I was thinking about how when I had Rhino, I lived in Frisco, Colorado. And we lived right down the street from the lake. And so they would always shoot the fireworks off over the lake. And he was always terrified of fireworks. And I remember I took him out into the alley and was like, look, like pointing, see? And he was just not having it. So that was the last time I tried to do that. That's funny with dogs. You're like, look, you're like pointing and they're looking at your hand. So anyway, I don't have a skit today. So I thought I would talk about that. So, I mean, I thought I had more to say about the fireworks thing, but that's it. Put your dogs in a room, in the bathroom. You know, if you're not going to be there with them. But, so yeah, I don't have a skit today. And I want to see, how do you guys feel about that? You know, are you pissed? Are you sad? Do you want to fight me? I don't even know. I'm just droning on. So anyway, look. I love you guys. I appreciate that you like me and when you comment. And I guess I'll see you in the next one. So, be good to animals, even people. See ya.
Ja, snämar, bärksbes, hrish.
Living out in rural, I hate rural. God, I hate that word. Living out in rural. What? What'd you hear? What did you hear, Slooch?